So we have the big guy in the middle, so surrounded by two little guys. I've had a great conversation with these two guys, and I wanted you to get to know them a little bit. We'll get into the book. The book has some behind-the-curtain stuff about the Lakers and coaches and particular players. We got LeBron's in there and some Kobe stuff, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But the book is much bigger than basketball. It is, as I was telling these two guys, it is a bromance to Buddhism book. And these two guys are an unlikely pair. They are the Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger of today. They are twins. They are brothers from another mother. They have some commonalities that just aren't intuitive. And so one of the things I wanted to start off with is really about the real story, about how you guys met. I mean, there's the book cover story, like they met at the equinox, okay. But how did that really happen? And Byron, why don't we start with you?
Well, it is true. We did meet at Equinox. We had a mutual friend that introduced us. And after he introduced us, obviously, on a day-to-day basis, we would see each other. And Charlie was working out with Val, is his name. And one day, Charlie was talking to me about, he needed to lose some weight. He wanted to work out with me a little bit. I said, okay, that sounds good. So we'll start doing a lot more cardio, because I was already there doing my thing, which was lifting the weights, and he was doing his thing with Val, so we would kind of meet up and do our cardio. And that cardio went on for probably a year or two, and then I said, Charlie, if you really want to lose weight, you got to put some muscle into it. You got to start lifting some of these weights. Had a great friend of ours that was a trainer there that said, Charlie, he's right. You got to put the weights in there. So we started to, do the weights, the running, and all that stuff, and slowly but surely he started losing weight. So that's how we met, and that was like 9 years ago. And one day, Charlie was sitting there, or we were sitting on the mat after one of our epic workouts, and Charlie said, B, I think there's a book here. And to be honest with you, I said, yeah, I think you're right. I said, I think it's a book on how to work out when you're 50 years and older. We were going to take some pictures of us doing some weights, take some pictures on the bike, take some pictures on the treadmill. We would do this hiking. We would run around UCLA. So we just said, yeah, we'll just take a bunch of pictures and we'll just do a little 50-page book. We'll hand it out to all the members. That was how I was thinking. Charlie, of course, had a friend who was in business years ago that, we wanted to sit down and have a lunch with, and he was thinking something totally different. He was thinking book, movies, radio, TV, and John, like you said, everybody kind of refers to us as, Arnold Schwarzenegger. No. Danny DeVito. Let's get that straight first. I refer to us as.
Excuse me.
Wait a minute. I refer to us as the modern day odd couple. Felix and Unger. So to speak.
So to speak.
So to speak.
One thing Byron neglected to mention, when we were working out together at Equinox, invariably 5 to 10 people would come up to us every single day and say, what do you two have in common? Why are you having so much fun? Byron, you're going to kill that old guy. What are you doing here? But they would never ask the second question of really, what do we have in common? And over time, it was clear to both of us that we had a lot in common, or otherwise we wouldn't have ended up having the friendship we do. And on this particular day that we were lying on the mat, there must have been 15 people who asked that question. And that's what really drove me to say, I think there's a book here, because really people don't get where the friendship comes from, and people don't have active listening skills to get down to the second and third level question of what do you have in common, or in general, what do people who meet have in common. So that really was the catalyst.
And one of the things about this book that's really nice for those of you who were challenged to read in this time and era, the book is broken down into chapters, and there's a parallel story of leadership and life between the coach and between Charlie. and from different perspectives. So a little insight behind what the NBA curtain, what happened at this particular team moment or a particular championship. And at Charlie's side, whether it was at McKesson or Deer Park or Fresh Pet or Sparklets, an insight. And then at the end, there's a summary. So you can put the book down and go, hey, I can start back up. Don't have to remember where you were because you get back into a whole new lesson. It's really well designed in that respect. So I'll just read the one little part of the book because I think this summarizes the book for me. And as I was telling Charlie this morning, I got into the book. The book, I was going, okay, I've read books like this before. It's a business leadership book, and it's going to talk about risk and innovation and stepping out of your comfort zone. But it does a little bit more than that. And one of the things I'll just say is this little quote in the book: true success comes when you make the most out of what you've got rather than trying to be somebody else. And I think a phrase that I've learned that's just so powerful and that's really in this book very much is you got to have the courage to be true to yourself and not live to the expectations of others, right? That's really the phrase. And that really comes out in this book. So let's talk about some of the issues that you have confronted as individually and collectively, and you share the stories in here. So the book comes to be, and you start to think about the lessons in this book and the leadership lessons, and there are some spectacular thoughts that start to emerge in this book. So let's talk about one of the things, like dealing with failure is something that's a theme in this book. What you gotta like about this book is it's not just about, hey, we were successful people and here's the formula and recipe, but there are some challenges in doing things. And I think, Byron, maybe just to do one kind of NBA thing is the 84, 85, 86 seasons, right? That time period for the Lakers was a big deal.
Yes, no doubt about it. And I think one of the reasons we talk about our failures so much is because you can't move forward or you can't learn or you can't grow unless you have fallen on your face every now and then. And Charlie could tell you this as well as anybody. Anybody that tells you they haven't failed in their lifetime is lying. That you haven't had any setbacks, you're lying. You've had setbacks, you might not recognize them, but we lost to a team in Boston in '84, and we knew we had the better basketball team. And Charlie don't want to hear this because the one thing I left out is Charlie's a Bostonian. So going back,
grew up as a Laker hater, by the way.
So going back to the gym, he didn't tell me that when we first met, which was probably a very good thing. Because we wouldn't be sitting here today if I knew he was a Bostonian at that time. But to lose to that team and the way we lost to them, and I know we got some young guys in there, but for the older people who are here, older meaning in my age group, experience-wise, we lost that series basically because of one play, and that was the clothesline that Kevin McHale did on Kirk Rampus. And from that point on, in that series, we lost our composure, we lost our focus. All we wanted to do was get them back. We forgot about playing the game of basketball again, and we ended up losing the series. So that failure of losing that series, the way we lost it, was a great lesson for not only me, but for the rest of the team, because we came back the next year with a vengeance. And the thing that we learned about the Celtics at that time is that they were much more physical, much more aggressive basketball team than we were. And going into that 84-85 season, we learned that we have to be able to play that style of basketball, but continue to play our style as well. And that's where we kind of get into, still being true to ourselves as a fast break, high-powered offensive team that wants to get up and down the floor. But we also gain some knowledge that summer of saying to ourselves that if you want to be dirty and physical, we can play that style too, but still do what we do, if you understand what I'm saying. So that Laker team the next year learned from that failure of losing in the finals, and we were able to take that and focus in on the next year, and it just made us that much more determined to come back and beat that team, because anybody in here that loves the Lakers, at that particular time knew that we had never beaten them in a 7-game series. All those years that Charlie was up in Boston having a good time when they were beating our butts, we had never beaten them in a series. So it was good to get that monkey off our back and to get it off of Jerry West's back and Will Chamberlain and Gil Goodrich, all those guys as well.
Notice he didn't say the C word. The team's name is not
I'm
uttered
not gonna say that.
in these premises. It's a team from Boston.
Yeah,
I love that.
They wear green and white. That's all I know.
The green and white team that happens to be from Boston. So Charlie, failure. You had your share of ups and downs and clearly successes in the corporate arena. Particular failure, I mean, there's a number of them that you point out, and again, in the humble brag of this book, because it is a book of humility.
Right.
What would be one of the failures that you would point out about that had the greatest lesson for you?
My investing philosophy starts with betting on the jockey, not the horse. And you can have the greatest idea in the world, but if you don't have somebody who's competent to really lead the team against that idea, it's not going to be successful. And so when I'm investing, I typically want to find a business that has, or a product that has unique characteristics that separates it from the competition. A business that's well-financed, but most importantly, has a leader who has shown an ability to be successful in that field. I invested in a business that I made an exception. And I invested because I fell in love with the concept, and it was a business in the athletic shoe area. And this particular shoe was geared to NASCAR and people who were either race car drivers, race car enthusiasts, or basically wanted to be around that arena. And it's the most heavily watched, most popular sport in the United States, which most people don't know. So I fell in love with that concept, and the person who ran it was a terrific designer, had a great idea, great shoe, but had never run a business before and was not open. And I thought, well, I'll be able to mentor that person. And I was wrong, and I lost a lot of money. And I lost a lot of money for friends, so I'll never make that mistake again. So you really, from my perspective, you want to be around people who have take risk, but have had success, and that those are the people that you want to be partnering with.
One of the themes in this book is about the assessment of talent, the recruitment of talent, looking at whether they're going to be in the C-suite or going to be starting five. And you see a lot of players, you see a lot of, I'll say, quote-unquote, athletes that come to you, and you got to figure out how they fit into the concept, the team, the culture that you're trying to build. And so what is your philosophy about hiring, recruiting, assessing talent? What are you looking for in the people that you're recruiting? Or when we start with you, Charlie, in terms of for the different businesses that you've had to rebuild and reorganize a number of companies.
First of all, when we talk about failure, I look at it as being willing to take risk. Because if you aren't willing to take risk in your career and willing to take risk with the products you're involved in, you're not going to get outside of the box, you're not going to be doing something different. And if you don't do something different, you're not going to really progress beyond where everybody else is. So when I'm hiring, the first thing I want to know is where have you taken risk, where have you failed, and what have you learned from it? And culturally, you have to embrace people who take risk and actually encourage them. And we talk about celebrating failure because of taking risk. So when I'm looking for someone to work with me, I want to make sure that person, number one, is open to new ideas, is willing to take risk, and has failed, and as Byron said, learned from that failure. Secondly, I want somebody who isn't worried about what the next job is going to be. I've always felt if you do the job you're in to the best of your ability, smart managers will notice and you will be rewarded for doing that job well. If I'm already thinking about the next job, I'm not going to be doing that job I'm in at a 100% level. So those are two things that I really look for. And again, I want to make sure that the person is more well-rounded than just is technically able to do the job at hand. You've got to, again, see how you can be helpful to other departments, not only do well in the department that you're in.
And Byron, you mentioned in the book that position titles, and you were talking about on a team, are pretty irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
So, don't get hung up on your title, right, as part of this
Correct.
process too.
Correct. I mean, growing up, when you talked about basketball, you always talked about the point guard, the two guard, the small forward, power forward, and really, I think most of those titles are irrelevant. If you got a guy that's a guard, he's a guard. He should be able to do a little bit of both. He should be able to be a point guard and a shooting guard. If you got a forward, he should be able to play both positions. So that was kind of my concept in New Jersey. I never put guard, one or guard two on paper or on film, or even when I talked to our guys. It was more of, you're a guard, and we should be able to run the offense on the right side, just like if they're taking that away, swing it to the left side, we should be able to run the offense on the left side. So it makes us that much more difficult to guard. So when I'm evaluating talent when it comes to basketball players, the number one thing is, can you put the ball in the basket, obviously, and can you help me win games? But I do look at character a lot, when we're talking about identifying players, because I want a guy who has those strong characteristics of wanting to win and thinking about the name on the front of the jersey a whole lot more than he's thinking about the name on the back of that jersey, because that tells me he's a true team player. You get a lot of guys in our day and age right now that are all about me and my brand and what I can do and what I can get, and it takes away from the team. I think the team is the most important. Magic Johnson, when I played in L.A. My first year, I'll tell this little story about how he told me or taught me what it was all about when he meant team. He came to me my rookie year when we got to the finals against the Celtics, and he said, we were just having a discussion on, we always did this every year for whatever reason. When we got to the finals, it was always, what are you going to buy with your playoff money? And guys would say, well, I'm gonna get a wave runner or a jet ski. Well, I'm gonna put money on a condo. I'm gonna go to Hawaii. And Magic would always say, because when we win the championship, we all win. I said, yeah, that's simple. Yeah, we all win. I understand that. We win the championship, we all win. He said, no, but you don't really understand what I'm saying. We lost that year, we win the next year. And really what he meant by that is from 1 to 12, everybody was getting endorsement deals. Everybody was getting all these paid appearances to come here because you're so wanted when you're the champion. And him being who he was would turn down deals and say, once you ask my teammates, you can't afford me, which, it's like Charlie making the, 10 years later selling the company for $1.1 billion. I don't know those numbers. Magic Johnson having company for 3, 4, I don't know those numbers. But I do know that when he passed it down to us, other little guys down there, we were all doing extremely well that summer. So I found out what he meant by when we win, we all win. Everybody gets a piece of the pie. And you can't do that as an individual. So I really study a lot about the characteristic of the guys that we try to bring in. Obviously, when you're on the level that I was on, which is the NBA, talent is so important. Talent is so important to win games on a night-to-night basis. But I think also just as important is having guys with great characters. Having great characters on your team, and that hopefully can form in having that great camaraderie that you need to be successful as a team.
So Buddhism point number 1 is the next is always the enemy of the now, right? I mean, if you're only thinking about what's next, then you're not here, you're not present, you're not in the thing, right? And my mother used to always say, when you're bored, you're not doing it long enough. That's what my mother would say. So, another thing so on the other side of failure, right, is winning. Mm-hmm. The other side of failure is learning from those failures and having lessons from that, but then focusing on the prize, the goal, right? And that's another big theme in this book about not only focusing on winning, but finishing the job that needs to be done, getting back into what we got to do to get to the finish line, right? Mm-hmm. And Charlie, you say with a great deal of pride, we are finishers. We've had our failures and we've had some challenges, but we finish. Isn't that right?
No, very true. Very true. And even as a young person, in my case, growing up in Boston, we had pretty bad winters, and we had fall season where all the leaves were falling off the trees. And as a young person, I would say, it snowed out today. I'm not coming home till I make $20 shoveling the snow off the driveways. And I'd stay out sometimes till 8 o'clock at night. My hands were numb, but I wasn't going to come back until I met that goal that I was doing. I ran a marathon, and I started running a mile around the reservoir in New York, and I set a goal, and I wasn't stopping until I completed it. How does that manifest itself in your career? Every step of the way, you have to figure with the business or the department that you're working in or the role that you're playing, what do I have to accomplish, and how am I going to set about accomplishing it? And one thing that I've found that always is critical is not thinking about this alone and thinking you can do any of it just by yourself. And with whatever goal you have, I think it's critical that you share it with the people around you, the people who you report to, the people who report to you, and the colleagues that can influence you, and make sure everyone is aligned with what that goal is, that it makes sense, especially if it's in business, it makes sense for where the organization is going. And then you line up what the steps are that need to be accomplished and how you're going to get there and how people around you can help you get there. And if you don't have that alignment, generally you don't succeed in getting to the goal that you set out to try to do.
So one of the things, Byron, in the book, it talks about the styles that you learned from some great coaches, Pat Riley, Rick Edelman, Larry Brown, etc., Jerry West. And you're not a yeller, it says in the book, at least. You've learned that Rick Edelman would only have a certain number of times he would yell. But how do you motivate a team? And it's a long season, and you've had seasons that were great, and you had some seasons that weren't so great. How do you motivate a team in terms of getting them focused back on that winning track?
Well, I think motivation comes from obviously the head guy. And my biggest thing when we had those losing seasons that I encountered was that all the troops are going to take after their leaders. So whatever they see you doing or see the way you're acting or reacting, that's how they're going to take their cues. So in coaches meetings, and Charlie's been in a bunch of our coaches meetings back in the day, and practices and film sessions. But in the coaches meetings is where we would kind of let out our steam. But when we walked on that floor, you want to be a united front. And every day is a different day. Every day you can get better as a basketball player. And that's the way I kind of approached my teammates, my team, I should say, is that when we walked on the floor, they saw a coach that didn't worry about what just happened in the past. He was focusing on what was happening in the present and getting ready for the future. And when I come out for practice, I'm having a lot of fun, I'm smiling, I'm enjoying myself, and I want them to see that on a day-to-day basis, that whatever happened last night is over with. All we can do is come today and get ourselves prepared for the next day. And Larry Brown taught me that, who's one of the greatest coaches ever. Pat Riley taught me that, even though he didn't have to moan and groan on losing much because we didn't lose a whole lot. So it was a whole lot different for him than it was for me, a few years ago. It was reversed. But, like Charlie said earlier, I've had great coaches in my life, great mentors that I was able to learn from and take some cues from. And those little nuggets that I took from each and every one of those guys helped form me into the coach that I was in the NBA for so many years. And I really think it's important that we talk about setting goals. As a player, I know I'm going back a little bit, but as a player, as a 12-year-old kid, and Charlie knows the story, my goal was to play in the NBA. That was my goal. I don't know how many of you, when you were 12 years old, knew exactly what you wanted to do in your life. But at 12 years old, I came home with my first trophy. The trophy was actually about that big. You know, it wasn't much of nothing, but it was the biggest thing in the world to me at that time. And I walked up, and my mom and dad were about to go out to dinner, and I was walking up to the house, and my mom and dad gave me this great big hug, said congratulations. And my mom said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I said, "I want to be an NBA basketball player." And of course, Dad, being Dad, said, "Well, what if you don't make it?" I said, "Then I'm going to be a Major League Baseball player." So obviously I had sports in my mind, but you know, nobody told me then, John, that you know, at 12 years old, when I made that decision, how to take those necessary steps to get there. And that's the thing, when you have goals, you gotta, write them down. Write those goals down. And whatever they may be, stick them somewhere, and just kind of stick them in a safe place. And every now and then go back to them, but now you got to figure out, what is it going to take for me to get there? And I never thought I was going to be a coach until Larry Brown, Pat Riley at 26 said, "One day when you're a coach, you'll see what I'm going through." And I told him, I said, "You out of your damn mind. I had no way am I going to ever be a coach." 32, 6 years later, Larry Brown says, "I think you would be a great coach. Have you ever thought about it?" And I'm sitting there going, now, I got two of the greatest coaches that see something in me that I don't see in myself. And I start, getting a notebook, start taking notes, start writing down things I would like to do, things I would do in certain situations just to prepare myself in case I got that opportunity. So, as much as we talk about goals in the book, it is so important to write them things down and go back every now and then and kind of, just to remind yourself, what you're trying to obtain, but also to just find out what steps you have to take. And that's asking that second and third question. What steps do I have to take to be able to achieve that goal?
And what it comes to mind is, those are powerful mentoring moments, that one you rejected from Riley and one you may have embraced a little bit more from Brown. And sometimes we need to have those mentoring moments come to our hearts and listen to ourselves. Listening is not just other people. Sometimes listening to ourselves, because that's something that's in you that you don't even see, right? So one of the other things that comes out of this book that's really powerful for me is, leaders sometimes get caught up in being leaders and being away from the work and the business, and they forget actually what's going on. I had a very famous coach tell me once, "I don't go to practice anymore." This was an active coach, because he had so many assistant coaches. And I thought, I don't even know how that matters, how you can even do that. But one of the things that comes out of this book is having a lived experience in terms of the customers, a lived experience in terms of the players, and being really a part, not their friends, but trying to understand what's happening at that ground level and being reminded of the gritty, real life experiences that are happening. And in Charlie's case, and I've worked for a lot of corporate executives who, some of whom practiced this and most of them didn't, went down to the customer level on a variety of basis, not just like I'm CEO for the day kind of thing, like I'm gonna, be down there just for a moment. Charlie, talk about your philosophy in terms of understanding what's going on.
So when I came out to LA, I was recruited to run McKesson Water Products Company, which is Sparklets in Southern California. And we had 2,500 employees at the time. We ended up with about 750,000 customers. And my predecessor had, and historically everyone did command and control. And by command and control, they kept all the information to themselves. They figured they knew more than the frontline people knew, and we'll tell the frontline people what to do and life will go on. And in fact, the company was in much more serious difficulty than they even realized themselves, because McKesson Corporate, which was the parent, only cared about every year having 5% growth in profit. And they were getting it by raising prices, and they were losing market share, but nobody even realized that the company was declining, not growing, even though the profit was growing. So when I got there, and I've always felt this way, the people who knew the most about the business were the frontline people. The sales reps calling on the customer service reps answering phone calls from customers knew far more than the managers knew who were sitting behind their desk. So one of the first things I did, the first thing I did when I got there, there was one reserved parking space in the whole parking lot, and that was for the CEO. My first decision was to eliminate the one reserved parking space. Maybe a little thing, but it's actually a big thing, because what I was trying to say is, I'm no better than anybody else is in this organization, so I'm not going to attempt to show anything that gives that impression. We flipped the organization chart, and we had what we called an upside-down pyramid, where the frontline people were at the top of the pyramid, and I, as CEO, was at the bottom of the pyramid. Again, who knew more about the business? And what we did to actualize all this, I went out on a route truck every 3 months, and I had every one of the managers having to be on a route in different parts of the country every 3 months and delivering half the bottles, making half the calls for trying to get new business, etc. We also had everyone going into the call center and taking calls from customers for a full day every 3 months. And little by little, people started to recognize that we cared what the frontline people had to say, and they started opening up about what aspects of our policies were good, what aspects needed to be changed, and we totally flipped the culture and the results of the company. And as John mentioned early on, we took a business that was worth $200 million when we started and sold it 10 years later for $1.1 billion. And why? Because we had systems that everybody knew all the data and had real-time actual data one day after the close of the period. So it was just huge, and it was all driven by frontline people telling us what we needed to do differently.
You can tell how you had to fire 1,000 people.
Well, that's another part of the story. The other thing I believe in is that 99% of the people in an organization are going to be honest and care about what's right for the business, not what's necessarily right for the individuals. And we had 7 separate strategic business units with different brand names in different parts of the country, doing the same thing 7 different ways, 7 separate chart of accounts, a consolidation accounting group. We were way overstaffed, and one of the things, to Byron's point, we first had to downsize the organization, and we went from 2,500 to 1,500 employees. How did we do it? We had task forces of the frontline people making determinations of what jobs were important and what jobs weren't important. And one task force came back and said, we should eliminate their whole department. And my feeling was, and what I said was, those people that are really keepers and are honest, we'll find jobs for you. And indeed we did, and we ended up growing back from 1,500 back to 2,500 employees, doubling the average revenue per employee based upon what they told us had to happen.
So one of the things, going back to how they kind of met, and when, I guess, Charlie was kind of stalking Byron, I guess. That's all I can think of it, because he was, no, Charlie. So, and you were watching, you told me this just a few minutes ago. You were watching Byron and how he comported himself, and you were admiring the way he comported himself in terms of his integrity, his attention to details.
Don't tell him that.
And you, and
I
so,
already read it. It's okay, I already read it.
and one of the things was how, Byron would know the names of people that were there, that were working at the gym, and know their stories and ask about their children. And so part of the thing about the details of business, the details of leadership, is what's happening behind the curtain. And there's a really interesting part of the book, at least for me, about Gary Vitti and the trainer for the Lakers, who was there for, what, 33 years?
Yes.
33 years, and who clearly was a quote-unquote strength behind that curtain because he did a lot of different things. But talk about how important he was to you, to the Lakers, but to the success of the Lakers as a team.
Well, like Charlie just said, that upside down pyramid for success, a lot of people don't know about Gary Vitti, but I think a lot of people know about him now because he retired and he was such a fixture with the organization for so many years. But he was the one guy that was behind closed doors that kept us all healthy. He was the first guy that I know of in the NBA that started us lifting weights, put in a weight regimen that Jerry West told him he was crazy, that he was going to ruin us as basketball players. Basketball players shouldn't be lifting weights. That's for football players. And Gary Vitti disagreed with him and kept doing his thing. And he had everybody on a program before they had strength and conditioning coaches. He was already a strength and conditioning coach, but he was also somebody that you can confide in as well. But he was somebody who I had a lot of faith in, somebody who I trusted, who wanted the best for me. And I thought that was very important. He wasn't thinking about his job per se. He was just trying to make me a better basketball player. So Gary has been there for 30-something years and had 8 championship rings. And it was just one of those mainstays of people that Charlie just kind of talked about. He was one of the frontline guys that went kind of unnoticed, but his worth to the team was almost irreplaceable. He kept Magic healthy, Kareem, James, myself, Coop, and all the guys, and we all loved him to death and had a lot of faith in him. Because anything that he would tell us that he thought we needed to do, we took him for his word because we knew that he wanted the best for us. So Gary was one of those guys that didn't get a lot of credit, because he was behind the scenes and he knew a lot that was going on, but he was vital in our championship runs back in the 80s.
There's a quote from the book. It says that the winning mentality in the organization flowed through Gary Vitti, and whether he was solving a life problem or teaching you how to properly lift weights, he was making you a better winner. So it literally takes a team. I mean, the team on the court gets a lot of attention and the spotlight, but there's the team of the team and how critical that is and the details of that, which you really, in this book, talk about understanding of what it takes to really deliver the product, literally and figuratively, in the world. Okay, so the bromance has continued to, it's the last time I'm going to say that, but has continued in terms of your partnership. Now you've written the book, and now really in terms of your common ground has really moved forward into a partnership about thinking about philanthropy, about doing good, about spreading the word about what you've learned in these lessons, but also helping young people about leadership skills and helping them get to a different place in their lives. So Charlie, we've worked together a little bit, and we're proud to work with you at the California Community Foundation, but really, and really you've shifted your gears in terms of focusing your energies and talents on the community. But one of the areas I think is very exciting, particularly with your partnership, is how to help young people see their potential and their possibilities.
Right. Well, one of the takeaways that we hope will come from the book, and I think that this is really critical, very few people can be Byron Scott. I think a lot more people can do what I'm doing and have a great career in business and have all the same adrenaline flow that you get from being part of a team. And in fact, quite honestly, with Sparklets and all the companies I've been working with, a lot of the top people were former athletes. because they understand team, they understand winning, and it works. And we joke about this, but you see the two of us, and by the way, I promised I wouldn't say this, but if you ask in the questions afterwards, it's okay. Why am I holding the basketball and he's holding the briefcase? I won't tell you why, but if you ask the question, I can then.
I can tell you the answer. The briefcase was heavier. That's why.
What we want to do, and we think that the book is really very possibly a great launching pad for us to do a lot more motivational speaking. We feel that too many people today, and I'm talking millennials and even younger than millennials, are spending too much time looking at their iPhone, not even looking up and seeing what's around them, and getting to understand that every single person has an interesting story, and you're going to learn from everyone you talk to, every situation that you're open to, and we want to let other people realize that there's a world out there that goes beyond just being a professional athlete or trying to be somebody that is in the public eye. The best people, the most interesting people, are often the person that's sitting next to you on the bus or the plane or wherever, and you just have to take risk to try to open up yourself to have somebody come into your life.
You know what, I look at our relationship and I go all the way back 9 years ago, and I think if I was in the weight room and Val never introduced us to each other, and we talked about this one other time, if I was in the weight room and I saw Charlie across and somebody said, you know, do you think you and him could ever be really good friends? I probably looked at him and said, no, I just don't see it, you know. Now, we told this to Peggy, his wife, and Peggy said, well, if Charlie would have saw you across the room and somebody would ask him that question, he would probably say, no, but I would really want to, you know, really want to be his friend. And it really is, just like Charlie said, about just sometimes you're sitting next to somebody who's very, very interesting, but you have no clue because you don't say a word. You don't even say hello, you know, which sometimes opens the door to ask the first question, and hopefully it leads to the second and third question. This wouldn't have never happened if a friend of ours didn't introduce us, and then a couple of weeks later, you know, we would see each other and we start talking a little bit more, and then a month or two later we talk more and more and more, and now we got this, what you say, bro? What you call it, bro?
I wasn't going to say the word anymore, but
bromance. Now we got this bromance where he's been to almost every event, anything that has to do with family, he's there with me, and vice versa. That's how close that we've grown together. And you know, like John said, I love him like a way older brother, but I love him. And you know,
what are you laughing about?
And I'm glad 9 years ago that somebody introduced us, and we had the courage to step out to get to know each other. Because when you look at the cover of that book, it's the reason we were getting the questions that we were getting. What do they have in common? And that's the number one question.
And if you would have walked up to, you know, if you see these two guys together, you won't think this now, but if you just saw them and you said, hey, I want to go say hi to Coach Scott, right? And you'd walk by Charlie and go, I wonder who that guy is. And I'm not interested in him because I'm interested in meeting Coach Scott, right? And you would miss a big part of the story. Not just the story about these two guys, but a story about life and things that would be very powerful. So that's what comes out in this book, is a lot of things. I think this is a good moment because we have about 3 minutes left. I'm looking over at Ted. Maybe talk briefly about the exchange program that you guys did. So you went over to where those guys that beat you, that little town over back east, right, to go see Charlie's hood, and then you brought him over to your hood. And talk about that exchange program, because that was a fascinating part of the book.
Yeah, we're gonna have to go back and forth on this, because I took Charlie to Inglewood, California, where I grew up, and took him to a soul food restaurant over there on La Brea. And I was like, Charlie, we're gonna go over here and have a little soul food in Inglewood. I'm gonna take you back to my hood a little bit. So we went over to
To his
Inglewood,
home?
to my home, and we walked in. Of course, everybody in there is asking for Laker tickets. And I'm like, look, we're here for food. That's all. Just food today. I'll talk to you next week or so about the Laker tickets. So we had a great time, ate a lot of food. And then Charlie was trying his best to get me to go to Boston. And I said, Charlie, no way. I can't go to Boston. And he said, well, B, you're a Yankee fan, which I am. I'm a big Yankees fan. He said, they're playing the Red Sox in a 3-game series at Fenway. You ever been to Fenway? No, I've never been to Fenway. So I, reluctantly agreed to go on this trip with Charlie. And he said, I'm gonna show you a different part of Boston, that you're gonna find fascinating. I said, I don't think so, but okay, let's go. So we jump on the plane, we go to Boston, and to kind of quicken the story, because I know he wants to jump in time, the Yankees, kicked their butt all 3 games in the series, and we're sitting in the stands. I'm having a ball, because we're winning. And then we would go to all these great places, the Freedom Trail in Boston. I didn't know Boston had so much history. I'm serious. I didn't know it had so much history. It is an unbelievable place, and we had a ball. But the last part of the story is crazy, because Charlie said, I want to take you on the north side. Was it the North Shore?
No, to the north end.
North End. And we're going to have some
That's the
authentic
Italian part of Boston.
Italian food. And I'm like, okay, I'm good with that. So we go into this Italian restaurant called La Dolce Vita, right,
La
Charlie?
Dolce Vita,
La Dolce Vita,
the sweet life.
the sweet life. And we walk in, and Charlie gets a big hug and kiss on both cheeks from this little, well, he's a little bit bigger than Charlie.
But let me back up. So I called some friends in Boston and asked them, what's the best Italian restaurant in the North End? And everyone had different restaurants, but they all had this one on the list. So I had never been there. I called and said, can we have a table that's not in the middle, because I'm with someone who's pretty well known, don't want to get hassled, so just find us a corner. And they said, sure, no problem.
And then,
But I had never been there, and I didn't know this guy.
so the guy walks up to Charlie when we walk in, gives Charlie a big hug and kiss on both cheeks, walks away. I said, Charlie, who's that? He said, I have no idea. Yeah, it was the owner of the place, right? So he comes back and he says, all right, come on, guys, I got a seat for you. So he takes us over here, and we are way out of, the public eye, so to speak. They had a big table in the front, but we're kind of hidden in the back, but we could still see everything, so it was still good. And the guy name was Franco. He started bringing us wine and all this food, and we're having a great time. And the guy, Franco, says, I have you guys know that Kobe Bryant sits right here. This is his favorite seat when he comes to town.
And he still didn't know who Byron
Right.
was. I never introduced Byron.
So me and Charlie look at each other. I said, really? He said, yeah, Kobe Bryant. This is his favorite seat when he comes. Every time he comes to Boston, he sits here. I said, oh, okay, that's good. That's good. So he walks away, and Charlie said, what are you doing? I said, I'm texting Kobe. So I text Kobe, I'm at La Dolce Vita in Boston, and Kobe texts back within like 10 seconds. He said, that's my spot. Tell Franco hello for me. I said, okay. And he said, by the way, tell him also to give you the limoncello when you finish dinner. So Franco comes back over, and he got some more wine. I said, Franco, Kobe Bryant told me to tell you hello. And he stops. You know Kobe Bryant? I said, yeah, I know Kobe Bryant. How do you know Kobe Bryant? So I'm his coach. He said, oh, he gives me a big hug on both sides. Tells the guy, bring more wine, bring more wine, bring more food. So we sit there and we eat for about 2 hours. We're sloppy as can be. I mean, we done ate so much food, we can't move. And the guy comes back, and I said, he also told me to give me the limoncello. So he brings over the limoncello, we drink it. And he says, okay, we take a picture. I'm going to put you next to Kobe Bryant. And that was the end of our trip. And I did tell Charlie this later, that I have a lot more respect for the city of Boston, because everywhere we went, the people that did recognize me, the one thing that they always said is that we really we hated you as a player, but we had nothing but love for you. You had, we had a lot of respect for you, and they would say, can I take a picture or an autograph or something? And it was one of the best 4 or 5 days that I had in Boston ever, and I would go back to Boston with Charlie. I don't think I would go by myself, but I would go definitely with Charlie.
This is a metaphor for something more important. When I first met Byron, he would order steak medium well. Now
This is part of the bromance now, right now.
No, this is really serious. Now it's medium rare. Sushi is now really sushi. Wine is now very different from what it was. He was always open to try something new. He was never, this is the way I do it and I'm going to stay. And Boston was a great example of how open he was to really embrace what the city is truly about. Byron introduced me to all his friends who he grew up with, and he still has, as do I, the same friends that I went to elementary school with. He has the same friends, and every one of them is a great guy and embraced me, and my friends embraced him. And all of a sudden, if you're open to trying something new, you're going to grow as a human being. And if you're not willing to try something new, your growth is stunted. And we have both grown through our relationship. And I think if nothing else that comes out of the book, I think that is the most critical thing. Stay alert, be open, meet new people, and you will continue to grow as a human being.
So let's hear it for two really good guys. Slam dunk success. We're going to go to the question and answer portion.
Great. So for questions, just a quick reminder around here, questions start with a W or an H, sometimes a D. They typically are short. We do not believe in two-part questions, and only John Kobara gets to ask follow-up questions. Now with the rules in place.
I'm thinking of the young guys in front of me who are in high school who may not have the dream that you had the whole time, may have no idea what it means to be a CEO of a water company or a business. What would you tell them about how to find your dream and what your practices are that made you successful?
Is that for me or is that for both of us?
For both. Go ahead.
Okay, so the thing I would say to you in terms of where you take your future, everything you do along the way, do it the best you can possibly do it. It doesn't matter what courses you're taking. If you're taking a course or what you're doing after school, just do it the best that you can. And honestly, one thing will lead to another, and the best people always rise, and you will rise in your career. Once you start to have an idea what direction you're interested in going, find people who are in that field and ask them questions. You're never going to know everything yourself, and you're always going to benefit from hearing what other people who have done that in that area, what they've done. Find out what their successes were, but also where the potholes were. Because you want to learn not to repeat where people made mistakes. And that mentor can be anybody. It can be your parents, it can be your teachers, it can be your after-school coach or whatever. But you'll learn, and that will help direct where you end up going in your career.
I agree with everything Charlie said. The one thing I will say is this, is that a lot of young men, like myself, who knew what he wanted to be at a very early age, some guys are in college and still are undecided on what they want to do. When it hits you, it's going to hit you. And it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks that you like, man, that's what, it's that aha moment, that this is what I want to do, this is what I want to become. And then from that point on, like Charlie said, you got to go at it 110%. The last thing I would say, because of being an ex-athlete, is the one thing I did do that I don't regret, because it didn't deter me from getting to where I got to, is don't put all your eggs in one basket. Okay, I put all my eggs in that one basket of being a pro basketball player. Whatever your dreams are, have some other things that you are very interested in doing, just in case, because it's going to happen. You get knocked down, you get back up and you pursue something else, and you go at that 110%. So, whatever it is, it's going to hit you sooner or later if it hasn't already, and when it does, give it everything you got, but if it doesn't work, don't be afraid to get back up on that horse and do it again.
One last point. I had no clue what I wanted to do when I was in school. I didn't even know when I graduated college what I wanted to do. I ended up deciding to get an MBA because I thought business might be interesting. But if you had asked me when I was in high school or college, do you think you'll be a CEO or you'll be doing whatever? I didn't know. The only thing I did know was that I wanted to study in a way that opened up a broader view so you could answer questions and be able to see things in a broader way than not in a narrow way. And that has been one of my strengths all through my career, that I can see a broader picture of what's in front of me and what can be, not what is.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Charlie, you mentioned that when it snowed, you took that opportunity to go and make money. Byron, you often talk about when it's raining, you would go and still run and practice because you knew that someone else someplace else didn't have rain. Can you share with these young people and with us ourselves, what does it mean to look at something that other people look at as an adversity as an opportunity?
George, I mean, I've always looked at the glass half full anyway. That's just been me, and you know the story. And George and I go back a little ways as Mike as well. But I've always took the attitude that, when I was working out to get ready for a season, and George knows the story about it was raining one night in Southern California, which it never does, pouring rain, and it was a night that I had to run. So I ran. And when I got back, my ex-wife at the time, she said, "Why would you do that?" I said, "Because there's somebody in Miami that plays the two-guard position that's nice and sunny that's running, and I can't let him get the edge on me." I always knew when I made it to the NBA, I wasn't the most talented basketball player in the world, but I knew what God had given me was pretty good talent-wise, but I knew my determination and my grit and my intensity and that never say die attitude was going to get me to, play a number of years in this league and be pretty successful at it. So I mean, again, it goes to you young guys, man. Whatever you got in your mind that you want to achieve, again, you just got to go at it 110%. And if you fail, you got to look at it as a learning tool and get right back and do it again.
Good morning, gentlemen. Charlie, thank you for sharing your wisdom. And Byron, it's always good to hear you and see you. My question to you is, can you talk about mentors in your life and the importance of listening to those mentors and how they've shaped you to become the people that you are today?
You want to hit it first, Charlie?
Yeah. I would say I was certainly early on most influenced by my father. And my father was the history of my dad's in the book. He was an agricultural engineer by training and was a very smart guy who took a tremendous amount of risk, starting with coming to the U.S. in 1937 before the war with no money at all but an education, and he left a lot of money in Poland, which he couldn't take out, but he came to the States. And he was a socialist, and really in terms of his view, and people that worked for him loved him because he really respected them and gave them their voice. He was very bad with people who he reported to. So I learned the good part of what he did, in that the people around him would run through walls because he gave them opportunity and rewarded them for what they did. But I also learned that you needed to manage up. It's just as important that the people that you're reporting to, you learn from them and understand what their needs are, as well as the people that you're that are reporting to you. The other thing I learned from him, and one of the stories I love to share, is a Deer Park story where I was dealing with a local Teamsters union that was actually one of the six big mafia controlled by one of the six big mafia families in New York, the Genovese family. I don't get into that in the book, but I do talk about the unions.
And they're going to come after him in the book. So, yeah, you couldn't put the GC, what is it, the Genovese?
Genovese.
Yeah, we had to leave them out of the book. They might be coming to LA looking for Charlie, so.
But what I learned from my dad is it doesn't matter if somebody's in the union, not in the union. If you treat everyone the same, they're going to all rise to the occasion. If you think that somebody's different because they have a different allegiance, and with the unions you have no choice. If you have certain roles, if that's an organized company, you have to join the union. But it doesn't matter. They're all people. You have to get to the hearts and the heads of the people. And I learned that from my dad, who had wonderful relationships with the unions as well as non-union. So he was a big mentor. The other one who I learned quite a bit from was a very well-known leadership professor named Warren Bennis, who has many books on leadership, and much of what he taught and believes in are aspects that I've incorporated in my leadership approach, because he was really a great teacher of leadership.
For me, Michael, two of the biggest people as far as mentoring me when I was growing up was my dad, number one. My dad, I would see get up every morning, go to work, come home, quick bite, go to another job. So he taught me what hard work was all about. He would always tell me that, in order to get anything in this life, you got to work hard at it. Nothing's going to be given to you. And then my mom, who was always telling me that you treat people the way you want them to treat you. You're no better than anybody else, no matter what. I don't care if you, and she used to say, I don't care if you become a famous basketball player, you still ain't no better than anybody else. And when I talk to you, sit down, because she always wanted to be standing over me and she didn't want to be looking up. So those two were the biggest, obviously. From a basketball standpoint, when you're around, guys like Pat Riley and Larry Brown and Rick Adelman, who I don't think gets enough credit in the NBA as far as being one of the greatest coaches. He's always been underrated. But those three guys taught me so much about being a coach and how to deal with players. Even though all three of them are old school like I am, they really taught me a whole lot about how to respect the game, how to go about your job as far as preparing for games, practice, everything. So from a basketball standpoint, those three guys.
B says he's old school, but I beg to differ. I don't think you're old school at all.
I'm old school with a new school twist, Charlie.
Okay, we have a couple more questions.
So my question is like, what's the mindset? What was your mindset like to the journey of becoming an NBA star or success in general? Like, what was the mindset that you had? Like, I know it began with the end in mind, but like the mindset towards like the end, like what was the mindset that y'all had?
Well, my mindset was very simple. I wasn't going to let anybody get in my way. Nobody was going to stop me from reaching my goal. So everything, I was like a horse with blinders. Everything outside that I didn't pay attention to. You guys know I grew up in Inglewood, which was pretty gang infested, drugs everywhere, but I did not allow that to get in my sight. So my mindset was pretty straightforward. Were there, road bumps? Absolutely. You're going to go through those, but I was just real determined to make it in the NBA. Now the trick is, and I tell guys today, getting there for some of us, that's the easy part. Staying there is the hard part. So you might reach that goal of getting there, but being a 10-year or 14-year vet, because every year somebody's coming after your job. So you got to reinvent yourself almost every year. You got to get better at certain aspects of the game every year. It's the same in business. I never took days off because I had that fear of failing. You know, and that fear of failing kept me going. You know, because I was always, like I said, when I ran that night when it was raining, there was somebody that's in the NBA that plays my position that's running where it's nice and sunny, and I can't allow you to get that edge on me. So for me, it was always having those blinders on, looking straight ahead. And once I got there, it was my mindset to make sure I maintained that and got, you know, even lasted as long as I did. I lasted 14 years in the NBA. My goal when I got to the NBA was really to play 10 years, but it went so fast. I was like, I'm still in great shape. I can still play this game. You know, so I ended up playing 14 years. But every year somebody was nipping at my heels, and you have to fight them off. So every year you got to continue to get better. You cannot stand pat in sports or business. If you stand still and you think that's going to be good enough, you're going to get passed up. If you stand still in business, you're not going to get to be a CEO if you don't take those risks. So me listening to Gary Vee and, you know, doing some of the things that he wanted me to do from a training standpoint, I was like, yes, let's do it. You know, because I was willing to take those risks to get better to make sure that I was able to last.
Our final question?
Yeah, hi. I'm a relatively new executive, and I'm wondering what techniques do you guys use to get people that work for you to buy into a vision?
That's a good question, Charlie.
In 10 words or less.
You know, you have to get to the head and the heart of people. And so you can't convince someone that your vision is the right vision if you don't know what the person you're trying to convince, what their attitudes are, what their needs are. Because ultimately, that vision has to make sense, and there has to be something in it for everyone. And you have to be able to articulate not only why the vision makes sense for the company, but why the vision makes sense for the person that you're trying to convince that it's the right thing for that person as well as the company. And if you can't convince that person, either your vision is wrong or they may not be the right person to be helping you take the path to get to the place you want to go.
For me, it's a lot easier because I'm dealing with only 4 or 5 people. You know what I mean? I'm dealing with a coaching staff, and I'm trying to convey to them my vision of the team and what I see and what I think we can accomplish, but I'm also asking them, what do they think? You know, I want their input because I want them to be involved in this process as much as possible. So when we're all said and done in our meetings, you know, everybody's on the same page. You know, and you want to empower those people. You know, I want to empower my coaches to go out there and do what they're supposed to do their jobs, and give them that platform to be able to go out there and do it. And that's kind of my way of getting to their heads and hearts, because now they know that I believe in them, and then hopefully they believe in the process.
So let me end just with another reading from the book real quick, the last Buddhism here. There is a Buddhist philosophy of never having a clenched fist. The logic is that if your fist is clenched, you're never going to be able to grab something else. And you have an open hand, yes, what you have in your hand may fly off, but you don't know what's going to come and land on your hand. So give it up for Byron Scott, Charlie Norris, their words of wisdom, their book, Slam Dunk Success. Thank you very much.